I spent a lot of time working on this issue to do with police and the use of force. And the one thing was that there was this period where there was this kind of what the media have labeled the shoot-to-kill rhetoric. I never thought that label was quite appropriate. But then I also observed this thing that the Minister of Police was using this terminology relating to referring to using this, what I subsequently started calling the doctrine of maximum force. And so, and then, you know, when Marikana happened, as someone who's interested in the use of force, I took an immediate interest in it and tried to begin to understand what had happened. But the one thing that then struck me was when I read the speech by the National Commissioner, and she'd made reference to this term maximum force in her speech the day after the massacre in justifying the actions of the police. And so the one thing is just that since then I've you know, tried to reflect on this question as to whether there was a role played by political rhetoric and specifically this idea of maximum force that was being articulated by the minister, and whether it might have impacted on the massacre. And so, you know, then my presentation partly reflects my thinking about that. But the other thing was then just that another issue that has come up for me as a policing researcher is just something about, for instance, in Australian literature, it's called the Minister-Commissioner interface. It's the relationship between the political principal responsible for policing and the head of the police. And so and so there's a question about you know, that speaks to this kind of issue of political interference and so on, because there's this idea that the police are supposed to act in a way which is politically impartial. And so then also just towards the end of the commission process, I ended up working on a submission which was about structural and systemic policing issues. And the one thing was that just in working on the submission, I just felt that it was necessary to present my understanding of what had actually happened. And that drew me into kind of reflecting on whether the minister had actually been directly engaged with influencing the course of action that the police took in the days immediately leading up to the massacre. And so, you know, and so then I've tried to, because in some ways neither of these two issues were issues that were, let's say, fully interrogated during the commission process. And so I think then my commission, essentially at this point just a presentation, but it draws together work that I've done reflected in papers and press articles that I've written in the past on these two issues. This work around maximum force, there was actually a piece that I wrote around the issue that was published. But then also, as it happened, I was involved quite extensively in working with CASAC, the Council for the Advancement of the South African Constitution, on their submission. And so, for instance, which also deals with this issue of the impact of the rhetoric and this doctrine of maximum force. And so, for instance, if you look at where the Minister of Police, Nathi Mthethwa, is being led in by his lawyer before the commission, she refers him to the CASAC submission. But as far as I understand, also then there were other. As far as I understand, also Judge Farlam himself also referred to one or other of these documents, and I think one or two lawyers did as well.